Hey everyone, this is Hafizullah Masoudi and you're watching From Code with Hafiz. I welcome you to the 16th video of the CSS series where you will learn about CSS and dropdowns. So I will show you how you can create a hoverable dropdown with CSS from scratch. So let's create a div and I will give it a class of a dropdown. And inside this div, let's create a span tag and let's say mouse over me. And after the span tag, let's create another div with a class of dropdown hyphen content. And for this one we will have a paragraph, so let's say paragraph and let's say hello world, like this. Now we need to write some styling for these classes, so let's get to our style tag at the head section. And first of all, let's target the dropdown, so let's say dot dropdown and curly braces, and we want to give it a position, so let's say position and it will be relative, and let's display inline block, so inline block like this. And after the dropdown, let's target the dropdown content, so let's say dot dropdown hyphen content curly braces, and for this one it will be displayed none by default, so let's say display and this will be none, and let's give it a position, so it will be absolute to position it below the drop down div or the parent div. Now let's declare a background color for it, so let's say background color, and for this one let's say hash f9 f9 f9. And after this, let's give the minimum width, so let's say min width and it will be 160 px, and let's give it a box a shadow, so for this one let's say 0 px, 8 px and 16 px and then 0 px, and let's give the color also, so RGBA. And for this one, for the red let's say 0, for green let's also say 0, for this one let's also say 0, and for the alpha channel let's say 0.2. Now after this, let's give it some padding too, and it will be 12 px for top and bottom and 16 px for right and left. And let's also declare some z index, so instead of inherit let's say 1, like this. Now after this, let's create our hover effect, so let's target the dropdown class, so let's say dot dropdown and let's say hover, and then let's say dot dropdown and hyphen content. So whenever we hover over the dropdown element, we wanna change the styling of dropdown content. So in here let's say display, well this should be display block, like this. Now this being done, let's get back to our browser and let's refresh, and now let's hover over this text and you can see now it is showing our dropdown, so you can see it is working just fine. Now next up, let's create a dropdown menu that allows the user to choose an option from a list. So let's get back to our Visual Studio Code, and first of all we need to clear all of these elements, so let's remove it, and let's also clear the styling like this. So to show you this one, well this example is similar to the previous one, except that we will add some links inside the drop down box and style them to fit a styled drop down button. So for this one, let's create a div with a class of drop down again, well this should be drop down, and inside this one let's create a button, so let's give it a class also, and for this one let's say drop btn, and for the text let's say drop down, like this. And after this we need to create another div with a drop down content, so let's say dot drop down hyphen content, and for this one we will have some anchor tags, so let's create one and let's put a hash in the href, and for this one let's say link 1. Now let's duplicate it, the second one will be link 2, let's duplicate it again, and this one will be link 3. Now let's style this drop down, So in our styles tag, let's first of all target the button. So dot drop btn curly braces, and let's give it a background color of hash. Well, let's say hash, and let's say 4c, and then let's say AF50, and let's give it a color, so it will be white, and let's give it some padding of 16px, and font size of, let's say, 16px, and let's give it a border, so let's say none, and let's give it a cursor of a pointer like this. Now this being done, after this let's target the drop down itself. So let's press enter here, and let's say dot drop down curly braces, and the position will be same as before, relative, and for display let's say inline block. And after this let's target the content, so drop down content and then curly braces, and for this one we will have display none, and for the position let's say absolute like this, and for background color, well, it will be also the same, so let's say hash f9 f9 f9, and after this let's give it width like this, and it will be 160px, and then let's give it a box shadow, so 0px, 8px, 16px, 0px, and then RGBA, so this should be RGBA, and let's say 0 0 0, and for the alpha channel 0.2. Now this being done, let's target the anchor tags, so let's say dot drop down a content and then anchor tag, and for this one let's give it a color of black like this, and let's say padding should be 12px for top and bottom, 16px for right and left, and for text decoration let's say none like this, and after this let's say display, and this one will be in block like this. So after this let's press enter and create our hover effect, so let's say dot drop down and then content, and then let's say a colon hover, and for this one let's say curly braces, and let's say background color, and let's say f1 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 like this, and after this let's say dot drop down itself, so this will be also a hover effect, and then we want to style the drop down content, so let's say drop down content curly braces, and for this one it will be display block like this. And finally for the button let's press enter here, and let's say drop down and then colon hover, and let's say dot drop btn and curly braces, and let's say background color, and for this one let's say hash and 3e 8e and 41 like this. So if we save this now, get back to the browser and let's refresh, now you can see we have a nice button. So if we hover over it, now you can see we have a nice list of links. Well, the hover effect is not working for these links for some reason, so let's see what is the problem. So if we get back to the text editor and check out the hover for the anchor tag, and yeah, we are missing a hash in here, so let's put it here like this, and now it will work. So let's refresh, and now if we check it out, now you can see it is working just fine. Now if you want to have right aligned drop down content, you can do that too. So let's get back to Visual Studio Code, and I will just show you how you can create a right aligned drop down. So for this one let's give it a styling here, or inline styling like this, and for this one let's say float, and this one will be left, and let's also declare an inline style for the drop down content. So let's say style, and for this one we will make the left 0 like this. So let's duplicate this div like this, and this will be right aligned. So for this one let's say float should be right, and for the content we want to make the right 0 like this. So if we save this now, get back to the browser, refresh, now you can see we have two drop downs. This one is left aligned, and if we hover over this one will be right aligned. Now next up, you can add image and other content also inside a drop down box. So to show you this one, let's get back to Visual Studio Code, and what we can do is, instead of this button, well, let's remove this one drop down, which is the left one or right one. And for this one, let's remove the inline styling like this, and for this one also like this. So instead of this button, let's create an img, and for the source I will go to images / and in here I have an image of img 5-ray jpg. So let's select this one, and for the alt let's say image like this, and let's declare a width for it, so it will be 100, and let's declare a height for it, so this one will be 50 like this. Now next up, let's also duplicate this image and put it inside the drop down content. So let's remove this anchor tags like this, and let's create another div with a class of description or disk, and for this one let's say beautiful image like this. Now what we can do is, well, for this one let's make the width 300, and for the height let's say 200 like this. So for the stylings, let's go to the drop down class first. So we don't need this btn now, so let's remove this like this. And for the drop down, the position is alright and the display is also alright. So for the content, I think it is also alright. Well, the only thing that we need to give the content is z index. So let's say z index, and it will be 1. Now let's scroll down. So for the anchor tag, we can remove this style because we don't need it. So for the hover, well, let's remove the hover of anchor tag because we also don't need this one, but let's leave the hover for the drop down because we need this one, because we want to show the image or the hidden content block. Now let's remove this drop down styling also, or drop btn styling also, but instead of this one, let's style the description. So dot desc or disk and curly braces, and let's say padding should be 15px, and let's say text align should be center like this. So if we save this now, get back to the browser and let's refresh, and now if we hover over it, now you can see we have a nice image in the drop down content. Now finally, let's show you how you can create a navbar with a drop down button. So let's get back to Visual Studio Code, and for this one what we will do is we will remove all of these divs or elements from here, and let's create a unordered list. So let's say ul, and let's say li, and let's create an anchor tag. So in here let's say hash, and for this one let's say it is home, and let's create another one. This one will be news like this, and let's create another one. So for this one we need the anchor tag, and for the text let's say drop down. Well, let's say drop down like this, and besides this, for the anchor tag, let's say in here we want a class also, so it will be drop btn like this. And for the content, let's create another div here. So let's say div with the class of drop down content hyphen content like this. And inside here let's create some anchor tags. So let's put a hash here, and for this one let's say link 1, and let's duplicate it, link 2, and let's say link 3 like this. Now let's head to our stylings or style tag. So first of all, we need to style the unordered list. So let's press enter here, and let's target the ul and curly braces. So let's say list style type, and it should be none. So let's say none here, and let's give it a margin of 0, and let's give it a padding of 0, and let's say overflow should be hidden like this. And let's also give it a background color. So background color should be hash 333 like this. And after this, let's target the li we want to float all the LIs to the left, so let's say float left like this. Now after this, let's target the drop down button, so let's press enter here and let's say li and then space anchor tag comma dot drop btn and then curly braces, and let's display this one inline block, and let's say color should be white, and let's say text align should be center, and then let's give it some padding of 14px 16px, and then let's say text and decoration, well this should be in decoration, and we want this one to be none like this. And then we want to create a hover effect for the drop down button, so let's press enter here. So in here let's say li and then anchor tag colon hover and then comma, and then we want to hover over the drop down, so let's say dot drop down and colon hover and then dot drop btn like this, and let's create curly braces, and let's say background color should be let's say we want to give it a red color like this. Now let's remove these other stylings from here to not get confused, so let's remove this one like this, and now we can target the drop down inside the li, so let's say li and then let's say dot drop down, so drop down, and I think we didn't have declared this class, so we can declare this one for this li, so let's give it a class because this one is the li which is in the drop down, so let's paste it like this. So for this one let's declare our styling now, so curly braces and let's say display inline block like this. So after this we have the content, so for this one let's say dot drop down, this should be drop down and then hyphen content curly braces, and for this one let's say display none by default, and position will be absolute like this, and for the background color, so let's say background color and let's say hash f9 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 like this, and let's give it a min width, so it will be 160px, and let's give it a box shadow, so 0px 8px and then 16px 0px, and RGBA, so 0 0 0 and 0.2 for the alpha channel, and let's also give it a z index, so z index will be 1 like this, and then let's target the anchor tags inside the drop down content, so in here let's say dot drop down hyphen content, and then let's say anchor tags curly braces, and for this one let's say color black, and let's give it some padding of 12px 16px, and let's say text decoration should be none, and let's display it block like this, and let's say text align, well this one should be, let's say left, and let's create the hover effect for the content, so let's say dot drop down content and anchor tag colon hover, and we want to give it some styling, so let's say background color should be hash f1 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 like this, and finally we have the drop down hover itself, so for this one let's say dot drop down, so this will be like this, and let's say we want to give some styling to the drop down content, so we want to display it block, so let's say dot drop down content and let's say display block like this. So if we save this now, get back to the browser, refresh, now you can see we have a nice navbar. Well, we have some extra margin and padding in our body, so now you can see it is working, but for some reason the drop down is not working. So let's check it out, what is the problem. So let's get back to Visual Studio Code, and in here we have dot drop down and then we have hover, which is this one. So when we hover over it and we want to give some styling to the drop down content, so we want to display it block. So for the styling the code looks good guys, but let's check out our elements. And yeah, well, I have noticed what is the problem here. So you can see we have this li here which is closing in here, and our content is outside the li. So what we can do is we can press enter here, and let's press enter in here also, and now we can bring our content inside the li like this. And if we save this now, get back to the browser, and now you can see it is working just fine. So for the extra padding and margin, what we can do is we can declare another styling in here. So let's say we want to target all the elements, and let's say padding should be, let's say, 0, and let's give it some margin also, which will be 0. And let's say box sizing should be border box like this. So if we get back to the browser now, refresh, now you can see we don't have any extra margin and padding. So this is how you can create a navbar with a dropdown. Now this being done, it was all for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching the video. If so, don't forget to give the thumbs up and a nice comment too. And if you are new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe too if you want more videos like this. So thanks for watching. See ya in the next video.